Rachel Meow found out her husband was cheating on her on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. She had just wrapped up a partners meeting at Hung Yuen law firm and stopped by the mall to pick up a custom cashmere shawl for her mother-in-law, Marilyn. As she pulled into the driveway of their gated community, her phone buzzed with an anonymous text: "Your husband is in room 1806 at the Intercontinental with Shiloh Sue. They've been there 3 days. Do what you want with that information." Rachel didn't speed off to the hotel. She parked in the garage, grabbed the gift bag, and walked into the living room. There was Derek, sitting on the couch drinking tea, looking as composed and warm as he had every single day for the past 7 years. He glanced at the bag in her hand and smiled. "For my mom." His tone was so natural it made the text message feel like a hallucination. I'll drop it off tomorrow." Rachel kicked off her heels and studied his face. 7 years of marriage had taught her every micro-expression. His left eyebrow twitched when he lied. He spun his wedding ring unconsciously when he was nervous. Right now, he was spinning that ring, and Rachel felt her heart sink degree by degree. She didn't confront him. The next morning she went to work as usual. Her assistant, Yao Cheng, was known around the firm as the best information hunter around, and within 48 hours she had a full report on Rachel's desk. Shiloh Sue, 26. Administrative assistant at Derek's company. Hired exactly 3 months ago. Hotel records showed she and Derek had been checking into the Intercontinental for 6 months, with increasing frequency, recently, 2 or 3 times a week. The bank statements made Rachel's blood run cold. Over the past 6 months, Derek had transferred money to Shiloh 12 times, totaling 1.8 million yuan. One transfer of 500,000 had a memo that read, "Bag for baby." The date was Rachel's birthday. Derek had told her he had a work dinner that night and couldn't make it. He'd sent a half-hearted birthday text. And on that same day, he'd wired 500,000 to another woman. "Mrs. Liu, there's one more thing." Yao hesitated, sliding another document across the desk. Derek bought a life insurance policy 6 months ago. Beneficiary is Shiloh Sue. Coverage is 10 million yuan. Rachel stared at the copy of the policy and almost laughed. 10 million. When she married Derek, the man didn't have 100,000 to his name. She had used her savings and the connections her parents left her to build his building materials company brick by brick. Now he was throwing money at another woman and buying a policy with her as the beneficiary, like he was waiting for something to happen to Rachel so his mistress could cash in. The real gut punch came 3 days later. Rachel went to her in-laws' house to drop off the shawl. Marilyn took it without a word of thanks, inspected it from every angle, and complained that the color made her look old. Rachel was used to Marilyn's casual cruelty and let it slide. But when she went to the kitchen to get some water, she passed by Marilyn's bedroom door, left ajar, and heard her mother-in-law on the phone. "Shiloh, don't worry. I've got everything arranged with Derek, that barren hen Rachel, 7 years and she still can't pop out a kid. What right does she have to call herself Mrs. Liu?" Marilyn's voice was warm in a way Rachel had never heard before. "Don't stress. I already told you, you're my daughter-in-law. You're the one I want in this family." Rachel froze, the glass in her hand nearly slipping. She'd been diagnosed with endometriosis 3 years into the marriage. Derek had held her and said it didn't matter, that he didn't care about having kids. She'd believed him. She'd felt guilty for years, worked twice as hard to help his business, tried to make up for it in other ways. But Marilyn wasn't finished. "I already talked to Derek about the house. He said he'll find an excuse to get Rachel to sign the papers, transfer that Minghu villa to your name. The deed's in Derek's name anyway. Rachel never paid a cent toward it, she has no right to block this." Rachel's blood turned to ice. The Minghu villa was her inheritance from her parents. They'd put Derek's name on the deed for financing convenience, but her parents had paid the down payment and all the renovation costs, and she'd covered the monthly mortgage from her personal account. Marilyn knew all of this. She'd been there when Rachel's father said, "This house is for Roy." Now she was calling it Derek's and handing it to his mistress. Rachel didn't kick the door in. She quietly walked back to the living room, her face wearing a perfectly composed smile. When Marilyn emerged from the bedroom, Rachel was watering the orchids on the balcony, graceful and calm, as if she'd heard nothing. Inside, she was telling herself, "Rachel Meow. You're a partner at Heng Yuan. You've tried 100 cases. You've pulled countless women out of toxic marriages. You're not going to drown in the same swamp. They took your kindness for weakness. Time to show them what real class looks like." The counterattack took 3 months of preparation. First, she secured the Minghu villa. She dug through the firm's archives and found the original purchase contract, her father's bank transfer records, and the monthly mortgage receipts from her personal account. Without alerting Derek, she filed a property rights confirmation through a contact at the court, claiming the house was registered in his name only as a convenience. The evidence was airtight. The court ruling came down quickly. Derek was too busy playing house with Shiloh to notice a thing. Second, she cut off the financial ties. There were 3 money channels between her personal accounts and their joint accounts. Rachel quietly closed them all over 2 weeks. Her salary, investment income, and inheritance dividends all flowed into a brand new independent account. She also had Yao dig deeper into Derek's company finances. What they found made her both furious and thrilled. Over the past 2 years, Derek had siphoned nearly 6 million yuan from the company through inflated procurement costs and fake supplier contracts. Most of that money went to Shiloh's accounts and an offshore investment platform. This wasn't just infidelity anymore. This was embezzlement and concealment of marital assets. These alone could bury him, Yao said, dropping a thick stack of documents on Rachel's desk. "We file this, he's out on the street with nothing." But Rachel shook her head. Leaving him with nothing was too easy. She didn't just want his money. She wanted every single thing he'd taken from her over 7 years, her dignity, her trust, her father's house, all the love she'd poured into a marriage he'd treated like a side business, and she wanted it back, with interest. Third, she looked into Shiloh. The woman's history was less than clean. Her previous job was at a trading company, she'd left under vague circumstances. Rachel's contacts in the industry told her Shiloh had been involved with the boss, and his wife had shown up at the office to drag her out. Beyond that, Shiloh's credit report showed 7 delinquencies and 3 frozen cards. She had 0 assets. She was the classic type, a young woman using her looks to land a permanent meal ticket. Rachel looked at Shiloh's photo and felt something close to pity. Derek had thrown away their marriage for this woman. The man never deserved her in the first place. She'd made a mistake 7 years ago. But it wasn't too late to correct it. The day it all came together was more dramatic than Rachel could have planned. It was Marilyn's 60th birthday. The old woman had booked a banquet hall at the Juniper Hotel and invited dozens of relatives from both sides of the Liu family, putting on a lavish show. Rachel knew the game. Marilyn loved showing off in front of the relatives. The money she was spending was all Rachel's, but she'd never admit that. She always found ways to tear her daughter-in-law down instead. Rachel wore a dark green silk gown that night, her hair pinned up perfectly, a pair of pearl studs in her ears. She arrived before most of the guests and greeted every elder with warmth and grace. She was flawless, the perfect Mrs. Liu. Derek stood beside her with one hand on her waist, playing the devoted husband for the relatives. Rachel didn't pull away. She turned and gave him a smile, soft and controlled, that made him pause. It had been a long time since he'd really looked at her. He realized, maybe for the first time in years, that Rachel was beautiful in a way that aged well, nothing like the cheap kind of pretty Shiloh wore. The banquet was halfway through when Marilyn stood up with her wine glass. gave her thanks to the assembled family, and then pivoted smoothly. "We have one more special guest tonight. My goddaughter, Shiloh." She waved toward the entrance, and every head turned. Shiloh Sue walked in wearing a hot pink mini dress and stilettos. She looped her arm through Marilyn's and chirped, "Godmother." Marilyn beamed like a jack-o'-lantern and announced to the room, "Shiloh is such a sweet girl. Thoughtful, capable, closer to me than my own daughter. I'm officially making her my goddaughter tonight. She's family now." Rachel noticed that Shiloh's seat was right next to Derek's, while Marilyn had strategically placed Rachel at the far end of the long table. The message was unmistakable. In the new power structure of this family, Rachel had been sidelined. Shiloh was the new center. The relatives exchanged uncomfortable glances. The atmosphere was like congealed lard. Linda Lou, Derek's older sister, was the only one who seemed uncomfortable. She leaned over and whispered, "Don't let it get to you." Rachel just smiled and swirled her wine glass. She was waiting for the right moment. It came when they brought out the birthday cake. Marilyn had Shiloh stand next to Derek to cut it, the two of them holding the knife together like a married couple. Guests started whispering, phones came out. Marilyn stood nearby, practically glowing. It looked like the engagement party she'd always wanted. Rachel stood up. She didn't make a scene, just rose gracefully enough that every eye turned to her. She walked to the front of the banquet hall, glass in hand, and tapped the microphone lightly. A clear ring cut through the noise. The room fell silent. "Today is my mother-in-law's 60th birthday, and as her daughter-in-law, I've prepared a special gift." Rachel's voice was steady and unhurried, like she was delivering opening arguments. "But before the gift, I'd like everyone to watch a short video." She nodded to Yao, who pulled a remote from her bag and aimed it at the projector. Marilyn's face went pale. "Rachel, what do you think you're?" But it was too late. The projection screen lit up with security footage from the Intercontinental Hotel, clips spanning 3 months to today, each one clearly showing Derek and Shiloh walking into the same room together. It was crisp enough to see every expression on Derek's face, the hunger, the urgency, everything he'd never shown his wife. Then the screen cut to bank transfer screenshots. Red arrows traced every transaction from Derek's company account to Shiloh's personal account. The final slide froze on the memo line. "Bag for baby. Rachel's birthday." The banquet hall went dead silent. All you could hear was Marilyn's ragged breathing. Derek's face was white as copy paper. He opened his mouth, but Rachel gave him no room. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice calm as a closing argument, "I'm announcing here, today, that my marriage to Derek Liu is officially over. He's been having an affair and concealing marital assets. I've already drafted the divorce papers. I'll file them with the court tomorrow." She paused, letting her gaze sweep over Shiloh, ashen-faced, then Marilyn, trembling, and finally Derek, whose expression had shifted from shock to pure panic. "As for you, Miss Sue, I understand the choice you made. A woman with 7 credit delinquencies, 3 frozen cards, and no assets has to find a meal ticket somewhere. Derek's as good a mark as any." Rachel's voice carried no anger. Only pity. The pity was worse than any insult. "But let me warn you, Derek's company has $6 million in embezzled funds, and a big chunk went into your pocket. Legally, you're a joint beneficiary of ill-gotten gains. When the court summons lands on your doorstep, I hope you're still smiling like you are now." Shiloh's hot pink dress seemed to glow under the lights. Her lips trembled. She looked like her spine had been removed. Derek finally found his voice, lunging forward to grab Rachel's wrist. "Roy, let me explain." "Don't bother." Rachel pulled her hand back like she was shaking off a piece of clothing that no longer fit. "The insurance policy you bought for Shiloh. The one that names her as beneficiary. In court, that's just more proof of embezzlement. And that Minghu villa. The court already ruled it belongs to me, not you, not your mother. She wanted to give it to Shiloh. Rachel's smile was ice. Tell her to keep dreaming. Marilyn visibly swayed when she heard those words. The color drained from her face like water from a cracked vase. She gripped her napkin until her knuckles were white and tried to speak, but Rachel cut her off. Oh, and Mrs. Zhou, Rachel had stopped calling her Mom, you just made Shiloh your goddaughter. Did you know she was kicked out of her last job by her boss's wife? Same situation, same woman. You have a real talent for picking daughters-in-law. You've got a type. A ripple of murmurs went through the room. Shiloh's face had gone from pale to purple. She shot up to run, but Yao was already below the exit, smiling. Miss Sue, don't leave yet. You haven't had cake. Derek was beyond pale now. He looked like a building with its foundation ripped out, ready to collapse. His eyes met Rachel's, and she could see fear, rage, and a dawning horror. He was finally realizing that this woman he'd shared a bed with for 7 years was far more dangerous than he'd ever imagined. But Rachel still wasn't finished. She turned to the guests, her voice clear and measured. I apologize for interrupting Mrs. Zhou's birthday party. But I've always believed in seeing things through to the end. Since she turned this banquet into a circus, I'm just performing the final act. She took a manila folder from Yao and placed it on the table in front of Marilyn. Marilyn didn't reach for it. She just stared at Rachel with pure venom. The original court ruling on the Minghu villa. Rachel's smile was razor-sharp. You were so eager to see it, weren't you? Now you can read whose name is on the deed. Marilyn's hand shot out and grabbed a glass of red wine, hurling it at Rachel. The wine arced through the air, a few drops spattered Rachel's green dress, but most of it missed. Rachel had stepped back the instant Marilyn reached for the glass, smooth as if she'd known exactly what was coming. Throwing wine. Rachel glanced down at the stains on her hem, and there was almost a smile in her voice. Mrs. Zhou, in my divorce cases, how many women do you think lose the custody fight because they lost their temper in court? Not that you have to worry, you're not my client. You're the defendant's mother. That's enough. Linda stood up and came to Rachel's side, lowering her voice. Roy, that's enough. It's still Mom's birthday. Linda. Rachel's tone softened for her sister-in-law, but her meaning didn't bend. This wasn't my doing. You sat there all night watching your mother humiliate me and your brother cheat on me. You know exactly what happened. You think I'm going too far. Then tell me, what would you do if your husband brought his mistress to your mother-in-law's birthday party and she announced she was making her the new daughter-in-law? Linda opened her mouth, closed it, and sat back down without a word. She'd always been the only one in this family with any kindness for Rachel, and Rachel didn't want to hurt her. But kindness wouldn't save the rest of them. Guests began to trickle out. Rachel knew that within 3 days, everything that happened tonight would spread through every corner of the Liu family's social circle. Marilyn's life's work of maintaining a dignified reputation would disintegrate in 72 hours. This was only step 1. Rachel picked up her clutch and walked toward the exit. At the door, she paused and looked back at Derek. He was still standing in the middle of the room like a man shaken awake from a beautiful dream. When he saw her glance back, he took a step toward her and called her name. Derek, my lawyer will deliver the papers to your office tomorrow. Rachel's voice carried no emotion. Read them carefully, especially the asset division. Sign voluntarily, and I'll consider not pursuing criminal charges for embezzlement. Don't sign. She paused and let the faintest smile cross her lips. And we'll meet in court. We'll bring the 6 million you embezzled, the 1.8 million you gave to Shiloh, and the 10 million policy with her name on it. You know what the law says about concealing marital assets. She walked away without looking back. Yao followed, her heels clicking on the marble floor like a victory drum. The elevator doors closed, and Yao finally burst out laughing, almost doubled over. Rachel, you should have seen Shiloh's face. Like she'd been stripped naked in public. And your mother-in-law, I thought she was going to have a heart attack right there. Rachel leaned against the elevator wall and exhaled. Her hands were trembling, not from fear, but from finally releasing something she'd choked down for months. She didn't like confrontation, but she'd never been a pushover. 3 months of preparation for this one perfect moment. This is just the beginning, she said quietly. Marilyn thinks she lost face. Derek thinks he's in a divorce. Shiloh thinks she chose the wrong man. They're all wrong. The elevator chimed as it hit the underground garage. Rachel stepped out, her green gown swinging in the cold fluorescent light. They'll learn soon enough. What I want back is bigger than any of them think. The divorce settlement went smoother than Rachel expected. They met at Derek's company conference room. Rachel sat at one end of the long table, Derek and his lawyer at the other. The lawyer, a Mr. Fong, had a decent reputation in commercial litigation but knew next to nothing about family law. Rachel glanced at his business card and already knew Derek had hired the wrong man to fight her. Mr. Fong started aggressive, arguing about equal division of marital assets, about the Minghu villa being a joint property since Derek's name was on the deed. He was getting worked up, practically spitting, and Derek was nodding along with that familiar arrogance Rachel had seen every time he got the upper hand in a negotiation. Rachel let him finish. Then she slid a folder across the table. Inside was everything Yao had compiled, evidence of the affair, bank transfers, hotel records, and the financial audit showing Derek had siphoned $6 million from the company. Mr. Fong made it about 3 pages in before his expression fell apart. His page flipping slowed. Beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. When he finally closed the folder and looked at Derek, the unspoken message was loud and clear. What the hell did you drag me into? I need a private moment with my client, Mr. Fong said. Rachel smiled and stepped out with Yao. 15 minutes later, the door opened again, and Derek looked like a man staring into an abyss. Mr. Fong's voice had gone from combative to carefully conciliatory. Ms. Miao, my client is willing to make certain concessions on asset division. Criminal matters aren't my department. That's for the police. Rachel sat back down, folding her hands on the table with the calm of a business meeting. But if Derek signs the divorce papers, I won't personally file a complaint. Whether the company pursues charges for embezzlement is between him and his partners. That's not on me. She paused and delivered the killing blow. By the way, Derek, Mr. Zhao, your second largest shareholder, got a copy of that audit this morning. He texted me asking for coffee to discuss next steps. I haven't replied yet. Want me to hold off? Derek shot up, palms flat on the table, practically lunging at her. His eyes were red, his voice ragged. Rachel, do you really have to destroy me? Destroy you? Rachel looked at the man she'd once loved. At least for the first few years, she genuinely believed they'd grow old together. He'd taken that and smashed it into tiny pieces, every one of them a reminder of how stupid she'd been. I gave you an out, she said evenly. I could have handed all of this to the police and the tax bureau without warning you. Do you know what $6 million in embezzlement gets you? Minimum 3 years. More if they throw the book at you. I came to you first because 7 years of marriage deserves at least that much dignity. If you think that dignity is cheap. She pushed the divorce papers toward him. You can say no. We'll finish this somewhere else. Derek stared at the papers for a long time. The room was quiet except for the air conditioning and his ragged breathing. Mr. Fong looked like he wanted to say something but knew the battle was lost. Finally, Derek picked up the pen. His hand was shaking so badly the signature came out crooked, nothing like the bold strokes he used on business contracts. Rachel watched him write the last letter and felt a strange, delayed weight lift from her chest. 7 years of marriage, over. But the story was far from finished. When Marilyn heard Derek had signed the divorce papers, she was at home sobbing to relatives about how evil Rachel was. But those relatives, once they left the house, turned her story into entertainment. The birthday video was too good to keep to themselves. The real bomb dropped 3 days later. Shiloh disappeared. The day she got the court summons, she turned off her phone, vacated her apartment, and even left behind the gold necklaces Marilyn had given her. She sent Derek one last text: "Your wife is too vicious for me. I can't do this. This is over. I'll pay you back when I can. Don't contact me." Derek called. The number was dead. When Marilyn heard, she was having tea in the living room. She sat frozen for a long moment, then set down her cup and said something that made Derek's blood run cold. "That's fine. She's gone. I'll find you another one." Derek looked at his mother and saw something he'd never noticed before, a controlling streak so deep and obsessive it had become its own disease. He walked out of her house without a word. The sky was overcast, threatening rain. He lit a cigarette on the doorstep and suddenly remembered something Rachel had told him in their 3rd year of marriage, when Marilyn had first started interfering in his business. "Your mother's need to control you is going to ruin you. You need to set boundaries." He'd brushed it off back then, thought Rachel was trying to come between him and his mother. Now he knew she had been right about every single word. And it had taken him 7 years to see it. Too late now. For days after the divorce was finalized, Rachel sat in her office at Hunyuan, staring at a new case file. She had won a major battle and should have taken time off, but she couldn't sit still. Work was the only thing that numbed the noise in her head. Yao knocked and came in with an envelope. This was left at the front desk. No name. No return address. She set it on Rachel's desk with a strange look. Rachel opened it. Inside was a photograph and a note. The photo showed a young woman, mid-20s, delicate features, a soft smile. The note was handwritten in neat, unfamiliar script. "Her name is Sharon Shun. She interned at Derek's company. She killed herself." Rachel's smile vanished. She stared at the photo, then at the note, and felt a chill crawl down her spine. Sharon Shun. She'd never heard the name. Derek had never mentioned it. If a woman had died after working at his company, why had she never known? She picked up the office phone. "Yao, find me everything on a woman named Sharon Shun. She worked at Derek's building materials company. I need everything you can get, fast." After she hung up, she looked at the photo again. This young woman couldn't have been older than 22 or 23. Her eyes held that untested, unguarded innocence of someone who just stepped into the real world. Rachel turned the photo over and found tiny handwriting on the back, scribbled as if in a rush. "Derek wasn't the first. He won't be the last." Her eyes locked on those words. The first? The last? What did that mean, that there were others before Shiloh? Or something darker? She locked the photo and note in her deepest drawer and felt her fingers tighten. She thought she had seen Derek's true face. Now she realized she'd only glimpsed the tip of an iceberg. Beneath the surface, in the cold dark water, there was more. And she had to find it. No matter how ugly. Yao's investigation came back 3 days later. She walked into Rachel's office with a thick folder and a face graver than Rachel had ever seen. "Sharon Shun's story is more complicated than we thought." Yao set the folder down and took a breath. 22 years old. Accounting major at River City University. Recruited straight out of school to Derek's building materials company as a financial assistant. 3 months into the job, she locked herself in her rental apartment and died from carbon monoxide poisoning. No suicide note. Police ruled it self-inflicted. Family didn't contest the findings. Rachel opened the folder. Inside were Sharon's onboarding documents, a few casual photos, and a copy of the police death certificate. Sharon looked exactly like the photo, gentle smile, soft eyes, the kind of girl you instinctively wanted to protect. But what made Rachel's heart stop was the last page, a log of Sharon's phone calls in her final 3 months. Someone had highlighted one number in neon yellow. The frequency was alarming, sometimes 7 or 8 calls a day, most between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. Rachel knew that number. It was Derek's private line. Not the company phone, the one reserved for family and a few close friends. It had taken Rachel 7 years to get access to that record, and Sharon had gotten it within a month of starting her internship. A 22-year-old intern and her 40-year-old boss, on the phone at midnight, 3 months straight. That alone told a story. But the story had an ending, and the ending was death. Was there any indication? Rachel looked up, not finishing the sentence. Yao understood. Her family came in 3 days after the death, cremated her, and took the ashes back to their hometown. Both parents are farmers. They didn't fight the police investigation. In fact, they seemed almost avoidant. Like they knew something but wouldn't dig. Yao lowered her voice. Also, Rachel, I heard that a week before she died, Sharon had a breakdown at work. Some co-workers heard her crying in the stairwell, saying the same thing over and over. He said he would take care of me. He lied. The office fell silent. Rachel felt a cold spreading through her, different from anger, deeper, more primal. He said he would take care of me. Rachel repeated the words softly, like she was talking to the girl in the photo. She looked at Sharon's eyes, clear and open, full of the kind of trust only youth could provide. Rachel felt a strange bond with this girl she'd never met. They were both Derek's prey, except Rachel had been strong enough, smart enough, to walk away before she was consumed. Sharon hadn't been so lucky. She'd been too young, too trusting, too ready to believe a grown man's empty promises. Find Sharon's family, Rachel said, closing the folder. Her voice was cold, but Yao knew that cold was the mask Rachel wore when she was most furious. Tell them I want to talk. About their daughter. Rachel, maybe take a beat. You just got divorced. No. Rachel stood and walked to the window. Her silhouette was sharp against the afternoon light. I finally understand something. The speech I gave at the birthday party, Derek barely felt it. He's done worse than cheat and steal. If Sharon Shen's story is true, then this man has blood on his hands. She turned back to Yao, her eyes fierce. A man with blood on his hands doesn't get to walk away with a divorce. He owes Sharon Shen. And I'm going to collect. Rachel underestimated Marilyn. While she was waiting to hear from Sharon's family, Marilyn launched her counterattack. The news came through Yao on a Friday afternoon. She burst into Rachel's office without knocking, her face a mix of shock and outrage. Marilyn is spreading rumors. Yao shoved her phone at Rachel. On screen was a screenshot of a WeChat post. One of Marilyn's mahjong friends had shared audio transcribed into text. Rachel read it and felt like she'd been doused in ice water. My ex-daughter-in-law couldn't have kids, so she blames my son. She's in a tough industry for a woman. How do you think she won all those cases? She's pretty, she's single, you figure it out. My son got set up. She planned to destroy our family from day one. It was brilliant in its vileness. No direct accusations, just hints. Rachel couldn't have children. She was ambitious. She was a woman in a man's world. Every implication pointed to something shameful, but nothing was concrete enough to sue for defamation. It was a poison that spread faster than anyone could stop. Within 3 days, the rumor had reached Rachel's professional circle. A client backed out of a contract at the last minute. Rachel's partner told her the client had said, "I heard Ms. Meow has some trust issues. I'd rather not take the risk." Rachel sat in her office for a long time. She wasn't easily shaken by public opinion. 7 years of lawyering had given her thick skin. But this was different. This attacked the very core of who she was as a woman. Marilyn knew exactly where to strike: Rachel's infertility, her ambition, and weaponized them into a lie Rachel couldn't easily disprove. How do you prove you didn't sleep your way to the top? You can't. Defending yourself just makes you look guilty. Staying silent makes you look like you're hiding something. But Rachel didn't stay silent. The next morning, she called her firm's defamation specialist, Mr. Chen. His advice was ruthless: vague insinuations are hard to prosecute. But you can sue the people sharing the post, choose the ones with the biggest reach. That sends a message. It also forces Marilyn to respond. If she stays quiet, she looks guilty. If she opens her mouth, she needs proof, and she has none. Rachel followed his advice. Within 3 days, 3 cease and desist letters went out, targeting Marilyn's most active gossip mongers. The response was immediate. All 3 deleted their posts within hours. One panicked and called Rachel's office, stammering she'd only shared it, not meant any harm. Rachel's reply was surgical: sharing is the harm. We don't accept oral apologies. Post a public retraction. The PR war was won, but Rachel knew Marilyn wasn't done. The old woman had lost too much: face, authority, her chosen, perfect daughter-in-law. She was no longer fighting for Derek. She was fighting for her own dignity, and a person with nothing left to lose was the most dangerous kind. Sure enough, 4 days later, Marilyn started showing up near Rachel's firm. Monday morning, Rachel saw her across the street from the coffee shop, a black-clad statue of spite. She ignored it. Wednesday afternoon, Marilyn was sitting in the firm's reception area, saying nothing, just staring at Rachel's office door. Security asked her to leave. She wouldn't. Rachel had to exit through the parking garage. Friday evening, Rachel was walking to her car after a late night. Derek stepped out from behind a pillar. He looked worse than the last time she'd seen him. Dark circles, stubble, hollow eyes. He blocked her path, and his expression wasn't angry, it was harder to read: desperate, wounded, the face of a man who couldn't accept his own fall. "Roy, can we talk? Not about the divorce. About us. 7 years, you can't just walk away from that." Rachel took a step back, keeping distance. In the dim garage light, their shadows stretched long. She felt nothing but a sad kind of clarity. He still thought 7 years was a winning argument, as if those years hadn't been built on deception. "Derek, there's nothing to talk about. The papers are signed. The process is moving. This is over." "It's not over." He moved closer, and something new flickered in his eyes, a stubbornness she'd never seen. "I agreed to the divorce because you had a knife to my throat. But you know I could fight you if I wanted to. You only won because I let you." The threat was implicit but unmistakable. Rachel's eyes narrowed. Before she could respond, Derek looked past her shoulder, and his face changed in an instant, from stubborn to terrified. Rachel turned. At the entrance of the garage stood a woman she'd never seen before. Mid-50s, a faded floral shirt, graying hair, a face worn by grief, but her eyes were burning coals. She clutched a photograph in her hand, her gaze fixed on Derek. "Derek Liu." The woman's voice wasn't loud, but in the empty garage it hit like a hammer. "Do you remember me? I'm Sharon Shen's mother. My name is Liu." Derek went paper white. He stepped back, opened his mouth, and nothing came out. Rachel had seen that look before, on the faces of guilty men in court when the evidence dropped. Pure, primal fear. Sharon's mother walked forward, each step deliberate, steady. She stopped in front of Derek and held up the photo, Sharon in her graduation gown, beaming. "Remember what you told her?" Mrs. Liu's voice cracked, not from fear, but from 2 years of swallowed grief. "You said you'd marry her. You said you loved her. You said your marriage was already dead. She believed you. She was 22. She believed a 40-year-old man's lies. Then she got pregnant. You gave her 5,000 and told her to get an abortion. You said the baby would ruin your career." Derek looked like a ghost. "That's not true. She didn't get that abortion. She begged you. You told her to go away. She spent 2 days alone in her apartment crying. She called me once, 'Mom, I'm sorry. I trusted the wrong person.' Then she hung up." Mrs. Liu's tears spilled over, but her voice never broke. "The landlord found her the next day. Carbon monoxide poisoning. No note. But I know what happened. You killed her, Derek. You killed my daughter." The garage was so quiet Rachel could hear traffic from the street above, and Mrs. Liu's ragged, broken breathing. Derek stood frozen, trembling from head to foot. "You're lying." His voice came out high and shaky. It was consensual. She did it to herself. That's not my fault." "Consensual?" Mrs. Liu smiled bitterly. "You were 42. She was 22. You were her boss. She was your intern. You had her in your bed within a month. You call that consensual? Or do you just not know that a relationship built on that kind of power imbalance isn't real consent?" Rachel caught her breath. That last line, "power imbalance isn't real consent," didn't sound like a grieving mother's words. Those were legal terms. Someone had coached her. Rachel looked past Mrs. Liu toward the garage entrance. A figure stood in the shadows, barely visible, but Rachel caught the outline. The figure seemed to sense her gaze, turned, and disappeared into the night. Derek was still thrashing. Fear had turned to rage, his last defense. "What do you want?" "Money. I'll pay you. Name your price." Mrs. Liu looked at him with something worse than anger, a cold, final disappointment. She tucked the photo carefully back into her bag and said, with terrible calm, "I don't want your money, Derek. I want you to pay." She walked away without looking back. Her small, stooped silhouette moved with a resolve born from 2 years of darkness. Rachel watched her go, then turned to Derek. He was shaking, his face cycling through panic and a deeper fear she'd never seen in him before. He grabbed her arm, too hard, and his voice cracked, "Rui, you know Sharon's family, right? Help me talk to them. Whatever they want, I'll pay. Let go." Rachel's voice was ice. She pulled free. "Derek," she said, looking at him without hate, without even anger, just a tired, sad distance, "you still think money fixes everything. That's almost funny." She turned toward her car, then stopped. "Sharon died 4 days after you gave her the 5,000. In those 4 days, she called you 16 times and sent you 37 texts. You replied to none of them." Derek's eyes went wide. "How do you know that?" Rachel didn't answer. She got in her car and drove away, watching him shrink in the rearview until the night swallowed him whole. She didn't tell him that Sharon's mother had shared everything with her. She didn't tell him that Mrs. Liu had shown up tonight because someone had tipped her off about Derek's location. The figure in the garage shadows, Rachel didn't know who they were. But she felt, deep down, that this revenge she thought she was orchestrating had another hand on the controls. Someone else knew about Sharon Shen. Maybe more than Rachel knew. At home, Rachel changed out of her heels and poured herself a glass of red wine. She sat on the couch replaying every detail from the garage. Mrs. Liu's words had clicked into place like puzzle pieces, forming a picture she hadn't fully seen before. Derek's pattern with Sharon was identical to his pattern with Shiloh. Shiloh had been in it for the money. Sharon believed him. Rachel put down her glass and typed a message to Yao. Get me Sharon's bank records, medical history, anything from her family that hasn't been made public. And find out if they have evidence they're holding back. Yao replied within a minute, Rachel, are you thinking? Yes, Rachel typed. If we have enough, I'm putting Derek in prison. A long pause. Then one word, okay. Rachel put the phone down and closed her eyes. Mrs. Liu's words echoed in her head, power imbalance isn't real consent. That line was too perfect. The timing of Mrs. Liu's arrival was too perfect. Someone was tracking Derek and feeding information to Sharon's family. Rachel opened her eyes and thought about the little things. Mrs. Liu's bag was old, but Rachel recognized the brand, mid-tier luxury, at least 2,000 yuan. Her shoes were worn but the soles were new. The photo of Sharon in her graduation gown, you didn't carry that around unless someone told you to. Someone was helping Mrs. Liu. Every detail, from the clothes to the script to the timing, was orchestrated. Whoever they were, they hated Derek as much as Mrs. Liu did. Rachel felt she was getting close to something darker than infidelity and fraud. The next morning, Marilyn struck again. This time she went straight for the firm's annual gala. The Hanyuan annual dinner was held every year at the Regency Hotel, a big event in the local legal scene. Rachel, as the youngest partner, was scheduled to give the opening speech. She wore a crisp white pantsuit, clean lines, full authority. The speech went perfectly. The applause was still fading when the banquet doors slammed open. Everyone turned. In walked an old woman in a bright red qipao, hair slicked back, makeup thick enough to crack, wearing that familiar look of smug cruelty. Marilyn Zhou. Behind her, two tagalongs Rachel didn't recognize, probably friends or relatives, marching in like an invasion force. Rachel meow. Marilyn's voice was high and piercing. I'm here to ask, you've bankrupted my son and you're here celebrating. Do you have no conscience? The room went dead silent. Phones came out. Rachel stood on the stage, looking down at the old woman. Her first reaction wasn't anger, it was cold assessment. Marilyn had picked the most public venue, the one where Rachel couldn't lose her cool without making a scene. She was trying to bait her. She'd picked the wrong target. Rachel walked off the stage, calm and graceful. She stopped in front of Marilyn, a head taller, and wore a polite, distant smile. She deliberately didn't lower her voice. Mrs. Zhou, let's take your accusations one by one. She pulled out her phone. First, about Derek's company going bankrupt. According to public records, his annual revenue growth has been 12, 9, and 15% over the last 3 years, and he just landed an 8 million yuan municipal project last quarter. If that's bankrupt, I'd recommend hiring a better financial advisor. Someone in the crowd laughed. Marilyn's face went purple. Second, about me ruining Derek. Rachel took a folder from Yao. This is a copy of the signed divorce agreement. All asset division terms were negotiated with lawyers present and recorded. Derek's lawyer raised no objections. Derek signed voluntarily. If you think he was coerced, ask him why he signed a document he claims he didn't agree to. Marilyn's mouth opened and closed. She regrouped fast, shifting tactics with a theatrical sob. Don't throw legal jargon at an old woman. I know one thing, you were married to my son for 7 years and never gave him a child. Mrs. Zhou. Rachel cut her off, her voice still calm. About that, never gave him a child, claim, my bank statements are public if you want them. 40% of Derek's startup capital came from my inheritance. The down payment and renovations on the Minghu villa came from my parents. My annual after-tax salary is 900,000 yuan. With investments, my personal income is 1.8 times Derek's entire company net. If that's what you call mooching off you. She tilted her head slightly. Then I think our definition of mooching is very different. More laughter and even some applause. Marilyn's tagalongs were backing away. But Marilyn wasn't done. She took a deep breath and went for the nuclear option. You're so high and mighty. You think I don't know how a woman gets ahead in your industry? 7 years my son was fooled by you. There it was. Rachel had been waiting for this. Mrs. Zhou, she said, her voice dropping to something cold and precise, what you just said constitutes public defamation of character. We have over 100 legal professionals in this room, including 3 judges and 5 senior attorneys. All are witnesses. She turned to Yao, as calm as if she were asking for a coffee order. Record that statement. Pull the hotel security footage. Every word she just said is admissible in a defamation suit. I'll say this one more time. Rachel looked Marilyn in the eye. If you have evidence, produce it in court. If you don't, leave now, before security escorts you out. Marilyn froze. Her helpers had already retreated. She stood alone, trembling, her face cycling through fury, humiliation, and something like madness. She grabbed a glass of red wine from the nearest table and hurled it at Rachel. This time, Rachel didn't dodge. The wine hit her white pantsuit like a vivid red flower. The crowd gasped, cameras flashed. Yao rushed forward, but Rachel held up a hand. Rachel looked at the stains on her jacket, then raised her head and said in a voice that carried across the room, "This suit was the first gift Derek bought me 7 years ago, with my money. It seems fitting that you ruined it with that wine. Almost like your family ruined whatever dignity we had left." She turned to the security captain with a perfectly pleasant smile. "Please escort this lady out." Marilyn was dragged out kicking and screaming, hair askew, makeup ruined, red qipao twisted sideways. Rachel stood in the middle of the hall, white suit splattered with wine, still upright and poised. Every person in that room had to admire her composure. The gala continued. In the restroom, Rachel changed into a backup black blazer while Yao wiped her hair clean. That was textbook cross-examination, Rachel, Yao grinned. Marilyn's never coming back for round 2. Rachel looked at herself in the mirror. Her expression didn't match Yao's lightness. Marilyn wouldn't give up, people who've lost everything have nothing to lose. But Rachel had bigger concerns. Sharon Shun. 3 days after the gala, Yao brought news. Sharon's mother agreed to meet, but at her hometown, a small county 200 kilometers from the city. Rachel drove down that afternoon. She met Mrs. Liu in a small local inn. Compared to the garage, the woman looked thinner, older, but the fire in her eyes was brighter. They talked all afternoon. Mrs. Liu handed over Sharon's diary, her phone chat logs, and audio recordings. Rachel read through the chats, Sharon and Derek, from casual work exchanges to flirtation to manipulation and outright threats. The words were painfully familiar. Derek had used them on her 2 years ago. "You're the most special woman I've ever met. Honestly, my marriage has been over for a long time. Give me time to wrap things up. I'll make it right, I promise. If you really love me, don't push. Then, after the pregnancy, if you ever say anything, I'll make sure you never work in this industry again. You're fresh out of school. Who's going to believe you?" Sharon's last message was sent 3 hours before she died, Derek Liu. "You will regret this." Derek never replied. Rachel closed the diary, her fingers white-knuckled. She looked up at Mrs. Liu, who was crying silently but still held that defiant gleam in her eyes. "Ms. Miao, Mrs. Liu said, her voice rough but steady, "I know you're a good person. I'm just an old farm woman. I don't have much. But my daughter's death needs to mean something." She pulled a pink USB drive from her worn cloth bag and placed it in Rachel's hands. "This is a video Sharon recorded 2 days before she died. It was saved on her classmate's computer. We found it later. She told everything in that video, what he did, what he said. She said she wanted someone to know his name." Rachel took the USB and closed her fingers around it. "Mrs. Liu, I'll take this case. No charge." Mrs. Liu's composure finally cracked. She grabbed Rachel's hand and sobbed out thank yous, her voice breaking like glass. Rachel held her steady. "But I need your cooperation. One thing, very important. It will decide whether Derek pays for what he did." Mrs. Liu wiped her face and nodded with everything she had. Outside, the county dusk was settling. Rachel sat in the inn-room, the pink USB in her hand, holding the last testament of a girl who had died at 22. The plan was clear in her mind, bigger than divorce, harder than asset seizure. She was going to make Derek Liu pay for everything. The real war was just beginning. Rachel locked herself in her office for 2 days after returning from the county. She watched Sharon's video 7 times. It hurt more each time, but she had to watch. Every detail could matter in court. On the screen, Sharon sat on her apartment bed in a white sweater, her hair in a low ponytail. Accounting exam posters were taped to the wall behind her. Her eyes were swollen, she'd been crying for days, but when she looked into the camera, her voice was eerily calm. "My name is Sharon Shen. I'm 22. I don't know if anyone will ever see this, but I want to leave something behind. To prove I existed." She told everything. The affair. The baby. The 5,000 yuan. Derek's final words, "Push this any further and I'll make you disappear from this industry." Her voice trembled at the end, but she never looked away. "I don't know if this is a crime. All I know is I can't breathe anymore. Every morning I wake up and it's worse. I can't keep living. If someone sees this, please tell my mom I'm sorry. And tell them his name. Derek Liu. He owns Jiangcheng Hengyuan Building Materials. I don't want him to die. I just want people to know who he is." The video cut to Sharon covering her face, sobbing. Every time Rachel reached that point, she paused, because the next frame showed Sharon wiping her tears and forcing a smile for the camera. That smile was more devastating than any scream. 22 years old. An entire life ahead of her. She chose to sit alone in a rental room and fall asleep to the smell of charcoal. And Derek had gone to work the next day. Meetings, calls, chasing his next woman. As if Sharon Shen had never existed. Rachel took 2 days to organize the evidence. Video, chat logs, call records, bank statements, plus the medical records Mrs. Liu provided, a county hospital report confirming Sharon was 6 weeks pregnant. Everything fit like pieces of a puzzle. But it wasn't enough. To bring a criminal case, Rachel needed to prove a direct causal link between Derek's conduct and Sharon's death. In law, suicide was usually seen as a voluntary act. But there was a precedent. If she could prove Derek used his power to coerce and threaten Sharon into a state of helplessness, she could argue civil liability under tort law. For criminal liability, the burden was higher, but a civil suit could still be a path to accountability. To prove coercion, she needed witnesses. She had Yao compile a list of Sharon's former co-workers at Derek's company. Over the next 2 weeks, Rachel personally interviewed every single one. Most refused. Many closed their doors. Rachel kept going. She knew the psychology of witnesses. Nobody wanted to get involved, but nobody wanted a death on their conscience. The breakthrough came in week 3. A former colleague named May Dong had shared a desk with Sharon and was close to her at work. May had quit after Sharon died and had moved back to her hometown to run a small grocery store. When Rachel found her, she was restocking shelves. The mention of Sharon's name made her eyes red in an instant. She pulled Rachel into the storage room and whispered, "I thought no one would ever ask about this." May told Rachel a detail that had never come out. Sharon came into the restroom that afternoon, crying, shaking. I asked her what was wrong. She wouldn't talk at first. Then she grabbed my hand and made me memorize a number. She said if anything happened to her, call her mom. May's voice dropped to a hush. I thought she was just homesick. The next day she was gone. She cried into her hands for a moment, then looked up with new resolve. If you're reopening Sharon's case, I'll testify. I remembered Derek calling her into his office that day. She came out white as chalk, like all the life had been drained out of her. I didn't know what happened then, but looking back, I know something happened in that office. Do you remember the exact time? Yes. March 14th, around 3 p.m. March 14th. Sharon died on March 16th. 48 hours after that meeting, she was dead. With May's testimony, the chain was complete. But Rachel held fire. She was waiting for the right moment. It came faster than she expected. Yao brought the news. Rachel, Derek's lawsuit against Shiloh just filed. He's demanding return of all transferred funds, $1.8 million. Shiloh's countersuing for emotional damages, claiming Derek used false promises to coerce her into a relationship. Dog eat dog. Rachel closed the file. That's my moment. A lawsuit forced Derek and Shiloh into the same courtroom, each tearing the other apart. Their mutual destruction could yield new evidence. Timing was everything. Rachel didn't keep this quiet. She contacted 3 major media outlets and announced she was representing Sharon Shin's family in a civil suit for wrongful death. Simultaneously, she submitted Sharon's video and supporting evidence to the Public Security Bureau, requesting a criminal investigation on grounds of coercion leading to death. The public reaction was explosive. Derek was now fighting 2 fronts, a civil suit from Rachel, a legal brawl with Shiloh, and a potential criminal investigation. His company took a direct hit. 3 clients canceled contracts on the day of the announcement. 2 suppliers called demanding payment. His bank told him a loan was frozen pending risk reassessment. Derek sat in his office, watching the news notifications flood his phone, and threw his teacup against the wall. Rachel meow, he screamed, his voice raw. What does she want? I gave her the house. I signed the divorce. What more does she want? One person cracked before Derek did. Shiloh intercepted Rachel outside the courthouse. It was the pre-trial mediation for Derek's suit against her. Rachel had just arrived when Shiloh flung herself out of a taxi and dropped to her knees on the pavement. Please, Rachel, please let me go. Her voice was shrill, trembling. Her makeup had run down her face in black streaks. Derek's suing me for $1.8 million I don't have. I spent all the money, bags, clothes, the car. I can't even pay rent. I was wrong, I know I was wrong. Just forget I ever existed. Rachel looked down at the woman groveling in front of her. 26 years old, using her youth and beauty as weapons, until the weapons turned against her. Did Rachel feel sorry for her? Absolutely not. But Shiloh wasn't the one who deserved to be destroyed. Derek did. Get up. Rachel's voice carried no warmth. You don't need to beg me. I never planned to come after you. What you took from me, Derek is returning on your behalf. But what you took from him, you're paying that back yourself. Whatever the court says, you pay. Shiloh's face crumpled. You don't hate me. Hate you? Rachel tilted her head. You don't deserve it. I hate the man who betrayed me. You're just a thief who saw an open door. And trust me, even if I did nothing, Derek would have turned on you eventually. He doesn't want a partner. He wants a toy. You're not a toy anymore. You're a liability. Shiloh knelt on the ground, watching Rachel walk into the courthouse without a backward glance. At that moment, she finally understood, Rachel had never been fighting her. Shiloh was just a pawn, a disposable piece in a much bigger game. The mediation failed, as everyone expected. Derek's lawyer and Shiloh's lawyer argued for an hour, the mediator gave up. Rachel and Derek crossed paths in the hallway afterward. She slowed deliberately. He stopped beside her, voice barely a whisper. Rachel. Sharon Shun. You set this up, didn't you? Rachel turned and met his eyes evenly. Sharon Shun set this up herself, the moment she walked into your office. I'm just telling her story. Derek's fists clenched and unclenched. You'll regret this. Rachel smiled, a cold, distant thing. The only thing I regret is saying, I do, 7 years ago. Everything after that, I don't regret a minute of it. He walked away. Rachel sat on a bench in the hallway for a while. She thought about Sharon's photo, Mrs. Liu's trembling hands, Mei Dong's tears. She asked herself, is this enough? No. Because Derek Liu hadn't paid yet. Divorce took his money, public shame took his reputation, but he wasn't afraid of those things. He was afraid of the thing he valued most, his freedom. That was the price he needed to pay. 2 weeks after the Sharon case was formally filed, the mystery figure finally stepped into the light. It was a rainy evening. Rachel had just left the office when she saw a woman with a black umbrella on the steps outside. She wore a beige trench coat, tall and slender, with a quiet, cold elegance. When she turned, Rachel saw a face she didn't recognize, mid-40s, well-maintained but etched with a fatigue that couldn't be hidden. Ms. Miao, hello. The woman's voice was even, steady. My name is Renee Fong. Rachel followed her to a nearby coffee shop. Renee chose a seat by the window, rain blurring the city lights. She didn't beat around the bush. Sharon Shin's mother, I'm the one who connected her to you. The garage meeting, that was my information. The anonymous note and photo at your firm, I left those at your reception desk. Rachel's hand paused around her coffee cup. Every piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Renee took a sip of her coffee, calm as if she had all the time in the world. Then she looked at Rachel and said something that cut through the noise. I'm not a crusader. I'm just someone who shares your experience. A pause. Your enemy is mine too. Renee's story was heavier than Rachel expected. 12 years ago, Renee was 24, a saleswoman at Derek's fledgling building materials company. Derek was a young, ambitious small-time businessman with a silver tongue. His approach was identical to what he'd later use on Sharon: sweet talk, promises, complaints about his unhappy marriage. Renee fell for it. She fell hard. 2 years later, she was pregnant. Derek gave her 3,000 yuan for an abortion. Same script, smaller number. Renee wasn't Sharon. She had a spine of steel. She didn't get the abortion, she went directly to Derek's fiancée at the time. Marilyn Zhou's niece. Renee told the niece everything. The fiancé broke the engagement the same day and spread the word through both families. Derek was humiliated. He didn't learn from it, he took revenge on Renee. He destroyed my career in 3 months. Renee's voice was flat, practiced. He spread rumors that I'd seduced him, blackmailed him. In the construction industry, nobody would work with a woman with that kind of reputation. I left the city. Had my daughter alone. Raised her for 12 years without a cent of child support from Derek. Rachel was silent for a long time. Outside, the rain fell harder. "So you've been watching him," Rachel finally said. "You saw what happened to Sharon. You found her mother. You pushed her toward me. Why didn't you come forward yourself?" "Because I didn't have the evidence," Renee admitted, a sad smile crossing her face. "My story is 12 years old. Nothing to prove it. Sharon's different. She left a video, messages, a clean chain. My voice alone isn't loud enough. But yours, a woman he betrayed, a lawyer with a platform, that voice is loud enough. Together," she said, "we can bury him." Rachel reached across the table and took Renee's hand. Her fingers were cold, but when they touched Rachel's palm, they trembled. "Renee," Rachel said softly, "you waited 12 years. Now you're not waiting alone." Renee looked down, and when she looked up, her eyes were red, but a smile cracked through the grief. "Thank you. I thought I'd given up. I moved on, built a life for my daughter. I thought it was over. Until last year, when my daughter asked me who her father was." She paused, fingers tightening on her cup. "She's 12. She's old enough to understand. I can't tell her her father is a monster who destroyed her mother's life. But I also can't let her live in a lie. So I decided to do something. Anything." Rachel nodded. She understood completely. This wasn't revenge for Renee, not entirely. It was a gift to her daughter, so that when the girl was old enough to know the truth, she could say, "At least my mother spoke." Two women in a rain-soaked coffee shop, an unspoken alliance, no contract, no fanfare, just one goal. Their hands joined across the table, the rain a curtain around them. Then the numbers grew. Rachel. Mrs. Liu. Renee. May. More women stepped forward, former victims of Derek's cycle of predation, emboldened by the courage of those who spoke first. They wove a quiet net around him. 2 weeks later, the criminal case was officially filed. The Public Security Bureau found sufficient evidence of coercion leading to death and began formal proceedings. Derek was in a board meeting when the police walked in. He didn't struggle when they took him. His face was the color of death. Marilyn collapsed when she heard. A neighbor called an ambulance. When she woke up, only Linda was with her. Linda sat at her bedside, expression not pity but exhaustion. "Mom," Linda said quietly, "this has to stop. You knew what Derek was doing. You knew about Sharon. You helped him cover it up. You pushed Shiloh. How long were you going to keep this up?" Marilyn stared at the ceiling. Her son, her pride, her everything, and when she needed him most, he was in a holding cell staring at concrete. The daughter-in-law she despised was the one standing in a courtroom, sending him where he belonged. Marilyn closed her eyes, and the tears finally came. The trial happened 3 months later. First, Derek's company, Mr. Zhao, took over. Derek was stripped of his title, and the company was sold to a larger group. Derek's name disappeared from the registry, as if he'd never run it. Shiloh and Derek's mutual suit became a public spectacle. Shiloh ultimately admitted to conspiring with Derek to conceal marital assets and was ordered to return 600,000 yuan. Her designer bags and her car were auctioned off, and she walked away with nothing but debt. Then, the criminal trial. Rachel sat at the plaintiff's table in a dark gray suit, her hair in a neat bun, sharp and still. When she stood to give her opening statement, the gallery was silent. The victim, Sharon Shun, was 22 years old. She died of carbon monoxide poisoning in her rented apartment on the night of March 16. In the 48 hours preceding her death, the defendant, Derek Liu, subjected her to verbal threats and psychological pressure lasting more than 2 hours, pushing her into a state of helplessness and despair. She chose to end her life. She presented the evidence piece by piece. The chats, the call logs, the medical records, the video testimony. Derek sat in the defendant's chair, gray-faced, hollow-eyed, as his lawyer frantically flipped through papers. Everyone could see the case was rock solid. The final blow was Sharon's own video. When the pink USB drive played on the courtroom screen, the silence was absolute. Sharon's face, so young, appeared on the screen, and her voice echoed through the room. His name is Derek Liu. He owns Jiangcheng Hengyuan Building Materials. I don't want him to die. But I want people to know who he is. When it ended, the gallery broke into muffled sobs. Mrs. Liu sat in the back, silent tears streaming down her face, her back ramrod straight. Renee was beside her, eyes red, spine equally straight. 12 years. She had finally made it to this day. Derek stood for his final statement. He turned to look at Rachel, not with anger, not with hate, just a gray, hollow emptiness. His lips moved, but no words came. Then he turned to the judge and bowed his head. I plead guilty. 2 words. Like a stone dropped into dead water. Derek Liu was sentenced to 4 years in prison for wrongful death liability and ordered to pay 980,000 yuan in compensation to the family. It was the maximum the court could give, and even though Rachel felt 4 years wasn't enough, she knew it was the most the law could deliver. He was led out of the courtroom in cuffs. At the door, he looked back one last time and found Rachel in the crowd. She held his gaze for a second, then looked away. He was already a closed chapter in her life. Marilyn's ending was more bizarre than anyone imagined. After Derek was convicted, she collapsed in on herself like a house of cards. Relatives stopped taking her calls. Mahjong friends drifted away. Linda, who had endured 6 months of abuse, quietly moved out of the city with her family. Marilyn lived alone in an old house in the older part of town, rarely seen, a ghost of the woman who once commanded attention at birthday banquets. 1 year later, Rachel stood on the balcony of the Minghu villa, watching the sunset flood the lake with gold. The house was hers now, her name alone on the deed. She'd emptied it of everything connected to Derek and redone the interiors. The walls were a soft gray. The balcony was full of green plants. That morning, she'd visited the cemetery with Mrs. Liu on Sharon's death anniversary. They left white daisies at the grave. Mrs. Liu had told her that she'd already told Sharon about Derek's sentence, cried about it, then laughed about it, and finally said, "You can rest now, Sharon." She wasn't at rest, Rachel had replied. She just doesn't have to carry the weight alone anymore. After the cemetery, Rachel had opened a message from Renee. She'd moved to another city with her daughter, who was starting middle school. Renee sent a picture of the girl on a school playground, smiling bright, her smile a younger, happier echo of her mother's. The message said, "I think I can finally let go of the past." Rachel looked at the message for a long time on the balcony. She thought about everything that had happened, the birthday video, the garage confrontation, the trial footage. Those images passed through her mind like film frames, but now they came with no anger attached. Just a quiet, heavy weight. Footsteps behind her. Yao came out with 2 glasses of red wine, freshly promoted to senior partner and radiating confidence. She handed one to Rachel and leaned on the railing. "What are you thinking?" "Numbers," Rachel said, taking a sip. 4 years for Derek. 2 years since Sharon died. 12 years Renee waited. "You think that's fair?" Yao considered. "No. But if you hadn't put Derek away, there'd be no fairness at all. You did everything you could." Rachel didn't answer. She watched the sun dip lower, the clouds burning orange, the lake turning to molten gold. A pair of birds skimmed the surface and disappeared into the light. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, smiled faintly, deleted the message, and blocked the number. Then she raised her glass to the fading sky. "Sharon," she said quietly, as if speaking to the wind. "He's in there. He's not getting out for a long time. A breeze moved across the lake, rustling the plants on the balcony. The last sliver of light sank below the horizon. Rachel finished her wine in one long swallow and walked back inside. Her silhouette stretched long in the warm amber light. On the table, her phone lit up again, with a work message, new case. Domestic violence victim. Requested you personally. 9 a.m. tomorrow, conference room. Rachel glanced at the message and smiled. Approved.